G'day, Dons fans, and welcome back to Don the Stat. Well, that one stings. Halfway through the third quarter against GWS, it felt like we might be talking about one of the more encouraging wins of the season. A young Essendon side went up to Western Sydney, took the game on, built a 26-point lead, and for long stretches looked the better team. There was energy, there was dare, there were young players stepping up again, genuine signs of what this next version of Essendon might become. But footy rarely hands out moral victories. The Giants' experienced players lifted, and what looked like a memorable win turned into a 14-point loss. This week doesn't get any easier. The Bombers return home to face the second-place Fremantle Dockers. I'm Jonathan Walsh, and joining me as always is my co-host Ed Hume. Humey, a lot of us walked away from last week feeling strangely conflicted, encouraged by what we saw, but also frustrated by how it all ended. Where did you land on it all?
Hey there, Jono. I normally sit here at the start of episodes, with 5 or 6 days removed from the game. I'm normally able to rationalise losses as the week goes on, but, a few days on, I think this really sits as a huge missed opportunity for me. I know there's a lot of talk about getting the best draft position that we can for this coming year, but you do need to win games like this to keep the fires burning amongst the group. So it would have been huge to get up, but unfortunately it was not to be. Huge challenge this week, coming up against one of the best performing sides in the competition in the Dockers as well. It certainly doesn't get any easier. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm going okay. A lot like you. Really frustrated. It would have been great for this young group to experience another win. Great for the fans, of course. But yeah, otherwise going well. Just a bit of a question, mate, without notice. Up top, I think you well and truly know, and you and I are aligned on this. We both hate losing, but I hated thinking this, but I was going home from the game and I was bouncing between, being really frustrated, or going home from having watched the game, I should say, bouncing between thinking, how frustrating and disappointing it was to lose another game. And then, well, at least we protect our draft position. And, I think that's the world we're in now. And the new draft rules kind of make it more so, don't they? With if we get a top 5 pick and there's a bid within the first 5, then we get a bonus pick. At the end of the first round? So, it's a really conflicting view, and I'm not sure I enjoy having it.
No, it's certainly not fun, and I didn't feel proud starting to look at some of the early draft rankings that were out there from Jasper and Tommy and Felix and a few of the others there, sort of starting to look up on Rohini Central some of the draft profiles of players that look like they'll be in our range. It does feel quite dirty. We're not even halfway point of the year, but the rational part of me is about we need to get as much good talent into this club as we can, and that means finishing towards the bottom of the ladder. But it still hurts talking about it because, man, it would have been good to celebrate a win after what we put up on the weekend.
Yeah, no, I think that's where I landed on it too, mate. Let's hope we can turn it around this week and get 4 points on the board.
Indeed. Well, look, this week, thanks to Rob Drake for signing up to the Patreon. We've also reached one of our goals for the year in making it to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So thanks to everyone who's checking out the show on YouTube, as well as the YouTube exclusive videos that have been going out. I do want to give a special shout out to my Year 12 Legal Studies class who got us over the line on Wednesday morning upon my request. Great work, guys. I was still not going to go easy on marking the next sack, though.
Yeah, glad to see that you're putting the class to the test there, mates, and getting them onto the important stuff and teaching them the important lessons of life. But yeah, you've put a lot of work into that YouTube channel this year, so thank you for that. It's nice to see it's paying off, and thanks to Rob as well for jumping on board.
Yeah. Well, look, speaking of YouTube, this might be the episode for listeners to check out the video podcast, because Sunday's not only the day the Bombers are facing the Dockers, but it's also your birthday, Jono. And to mark that special occasion, I've brought you a present, which we are going to open live on the show and hold up to the camera.
Yeah, thank you, mate. I'm a little bit nervous about this, but yeah, I've had it. I think it arrived on Monday, so I've had to wait until now to work out what you've done here. I feel a little bit like I might be getting stitched up here, but we'll see how we go. I'm seeing plenty of red and black already. Oh, that looks awfully like Nick Martin pajamas.
Yes, there was an episode earlier in the year where you sort of mentioned that you go to sleep in your Nick Martin pajamas, and I knew you were being figurative there, but I thought we should make it literal, given both your and my love for Nick Martin. As you can see from behind me, knew they would come in handy. So now you can really be sleeping in your Nick Martin pajamas.
You've outdone yourself there, mate. Thank you for that, and gives all of our listeners a bit of a scary thought as well. So hopefully no one's driving their car at the moment.
No, indeed. Well, look, let's get on to the main show. That's enough self-indulgence. As we sort of said, that was a game that got away from us. When you're 26 points up, halfway through the third quarter, you'd expect to win more games than not. And unfortunately, a few things didn't go our way. And I think as the game opened up, I think if you think about the start of the game, we were able to lock them down. But as players tired, the more senior bodies of the Giants, and their top end players really got on top, and unfortunately that is what led them to win the game in the end.
Yeah, look, and arguably our lead could have been bigger. We had a couple of patches where we really did dominate the game. Early in the game, we dominated territory, couldn't really put it on the board. We sort of went toe-to-toe. We had a couple of sort of 10 or 15-minute runs where we had momentum but only scored the 3 goals. There was one in the second quarter where we had 13 more uncontested marks, we had more uncontested marks, 13-7. We won contested possession by 4 as well and kicked 3 goals straight to 0, all from turnover, and missed a couple of chances as well. So didn't quite nail that. And then, that run in the third where all of a sudden we're 26 points up, we kicked 3 goals to 0. The ball movement was really slick, and it just looked like it was going to break open for us a little bit like that Melbourne game, didn't it? We kept taking the game on and felt like we were, had a chance to really rip it open, but they got a goal from a centre bounce to end that momentum. And then after that, it was 9 goals 2 to 3 goals 4. So, I feel like we didn't quite nail the opportunity to make it a 30, 36, 40-point game. And in the end, we kept it close enough for them to be able to run out over the top of us.
Yeah, I think the big talking point out of the game, sort of watching the media coverage after, was the way in which the Giants were able to move the ball from defensive 50 to the forward 50 transition, particularly in that first half. All their games came from defensive 50 chains, whether it's from a stoppage, intercept, or a kick out. And I think we had so much territory there, and a lot of the times when they tried to exit, we did manage to win it back off them there. We had 27 forward half intercepts, which was our best for the season. That said, the way in which we were playing it, and we were talking about this when we were watching the game, that it did really remind us of that 2024 era Essendon style of play. Once the Giants were able to breach the main defensive wall, it was really easy for them to score. And unfortunately for us, when they did do it, they made us pay there.
Yeah, no, they certainly did. We intercepted 27 times in our forward half, as you said, 5 of those in our own forward 50. Just to put context on that, because they're just numbers, the AFL average for forward half intercepts is 20 and 3.4 for forward 50 intercepts. Sydney and the Gold Coast are ranked number 1 for forward half intercepts this season with 26 a game. Sydney are also number 1 for forward 50 intercepts with 5 a game. So what we did against the Giants in terms of being able to win the ball back off them, against a team, mind you, who's the number 1 team from going from D50 to forward 50, was at elite levels, but we're only able to score 4 goals 4 from that. And they scored a lot from D50 exits, ultimately not because we couldn't defend. We had 27 examples of where we were able to do that and win the ball back off them. What hurt us was that we just weren't able to convert enough of our entries and re-entries into scores. So I think that don't get lost in some of the comments that are being made about us once again in AFL media, because I think there was a lot of good there if you're prepared to go back and watch the game and look at that against a team that is really, really hard to defend coming out of D50. We just weren't able to sustain it because ultimately we weren't able to score.
Yeah, and I think the big missing piece from the way we played in that game was our lack of ground ball players in our forward line. We were creating so many opportunities with our forward 50 entries. When we couldn't get a mark, we were bringing the ball to ground, but once it hit there, we couldn't actually win it. So in that first half, when we were so dominant in territory, we only had 4 ground ball gets inside our forward 50. Even though we went in there 37 times, and for the whole game, we only had 10. So that's 1 every 6.1 forward 50 entries. If you look at the comparison on the AFL average, the average forward 50 ground ball win rate is 1 every 3.55 entries. So we were well off the mark here. It's really the kind of game where we missed Isaac Kako, or we could have picked a Gresham or a Hussein. We really ran with just Jaden Newen as a ground level player. And for all Jaden's been really good at in terms of, I think, defensively structured and some of his lead-up play, I don't think ground ball gets is really his game at the moment.
No, it's not. He doesn't quite know how to get to the drop of the ball, and just look, he hasn't had a lot of experience playing as a forward, particularly at senior level. It's mostly been down back, and he's showing some positive signs, but as a crumbing forward, he doesn't have that craft, and it is a real craft in its own right. The Giants had 14 forward 50 ground balls from just 46 entries, so they were really effective in that part of the game. And I think in the modern game, when people think about small forwards, a lot of it is thinking about pressure. But you don't actually have to pressure if you've got the footy. And we weren't getting enough of that at ground level. So just some AFL numbers. Kel Shadir, strangely enough, is number one for forward 50 ground balls this season. Not a small forward, but he's averaging 3.7 a game. Lockie Fogarty, Nathan O'Driscoll, they average 3. They're second and third. Nick Watson is fourth, averaging 2.8. We all know the impact that Nick Watson's having on the Hawks. Hussein Al-Ashkar is ranked 7th in the AFL with 2.5 a game. So what he lacks in pressure at the moment and probably match fitness, he makes up for getting to the right spots to win ground balls. He knows how to get to the drop of the footy and be able to win the ball at ground level and convert that either into a score or an opportunity for an opponent. For a teammate. And then Kako's our next best at 1.5. But given he's not available, nor is Unwin, I think, Gresham needed to be playing. I think Huss, I get why they're probably looking longer term with Huss and playing him in the VFL to build up that tank. But I know we want to see more kids, and we don't want to slow down the development of some of these guys. But I think it might just help, likes of Farrow and Roberts and that playing down back to develop if we have, Gresham and Huss, one or both of them winning some ground balls in the forward 50 so that it's not pinging out as fast as it was on Saturday.
Yeah, I guess the other way of looking at that first half, and obviously we were exposed from D50 to forward 50 transition, but that was the only way that they scored in that opening half. We essentially took away every other scoring opportunity for them in that first half. Admittedly, they're a team that is more set up than most to score from D50 transition, but to deny them all other opportunities was somewhat pleasing in that opening half.
Yeah, it was. And that's the other component. We're a long way off being a finished product. I don't think we're going to have a game this year, as much as we would like it, where everything goes according to plan. In fact, I'm not sure, Fremantle and Sydney on the top of the ladder are getting that, or Brisbane as back-to-back reigning premiers. But we had 8 guys with 20 or less games of experience, another 4 guys under 40 games. And again, Archie Roberts was our 12th most experienced player with 36 games. Compare that to GWS. Jake Riccardi was their 12th most experienced at 26 years of age and 96 games of experience. So, we're not going to be able to tick every box, but I think we ticked enough boxes, I think, not to get the win, of course, and that's what we all crave, but to again show signs that these young players are playing the right type of footy and we're going about it in the right way.
Yeah. One thing, I mentioned earlier that it felt like a 2024 game, at least early on, or the first half. One thing that felt really different to what we saw in 2024 was our ability to be patient with the ball in order to build up to scores. When the forward line was ingested in that opening half, instead of rushing a high ball, we were a lot more methodical, taking our time, working the ball around the 50 until we found the right option. I think, I've been critical of Archie Roberts' disposal for a while now, but I thought he really exemplified this with a couple of his bullet passes to targets inside 50. We just were really patient and we worked the Giants over until we could get that target. And then fortunately for us, we were able to hit those targets and then convert them into scores. So, it was pleasing to see some evolution of the method of forward 50 entries over previous years.
Yeah, it was. I think we're starting to see some of these young players presenting at the top of the 50 as well. When we do get those chains of uncontested marks, it's not the quick and fast kicks into the corridor that's releasing things, but it's that slow build up and then getting the ball to that dangerous area, sort of 60 to 70 out from goal, and that needs real footy IQ to be able to recognise that. I think it's something that Perkins, when he's at his best, has always been good at. But on the weekend, we saw Sharp a number of times pop up into that space, Robey, Day Wicks, and it needs 2 things to happen. It needs your forwards and your other mids to be aware and open that space up, and then it needs players to move into that space. And we started to see a fair bit of that. Parrish was another one who wasn't bad, but yeah, seeing those young guys recognise that space and pop into it was something that was really pleasing for me.
Yeah, and I guess the other aspect of our forward line that was really strong was the performance of our key forwards, Archie May, Nate Caddy, and then Peter Wright when he went forward when he was sharing the ruckload with Nick Bryan. I thought came in, it's actually not on the running sheet, but I thought Nick Bryan for a first game back in over a year was solid enough. And what that allowed them was Peter Wright to get forward and be dangerous that way, whilst also still contributing as a ruckman and around the ground. But I think it worked better having those tools down there that it really has in previous weeks. We've talked a lot about these players getting in the way of each other. But at least on this occasion, they seem to work really well for each other. And there seems to be a good understanding of who's expected to go for a ball, who has to stand back, who sort of holds that deepest position. It's really pleasing to see that sort of thing come together.
Yeah, it was good to see Nick Bryan get that run, and I think the two rucks worked well. We spoke about that in the preview, where it might be an area that we could get an advantage. And, I think it was the right call, and then we got 8 goals between Wright, May and Caddy, 5 contested marks between them as well. You'd take that output every week if you could get it. And yeah, I'm with you. I think they're starting to learn how to play with one another. You didn't see them compete for the same ball too often. May played that anchor role close to goal. Geez, he's a great set shot, isn't he? He's probably the most reliable set shot we've got at the moment. Peter Wright's found his set shot again this year. It sort of went missing a little bit at times last year. And then Nate Caddy just keeps showing that he's got untapped potential and is going to be a really, really good player for us. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to like with how those three work together. And it didn't take away from Peter Wright's game not rucking as much, and it didn't take away from May and Caddy's game having Wright in the forward line as well. So it's the first time we've seen a true ruckman come into the side, Peter Wright play a bit more forward, and the three of them worked well together.
Yeah, just sort of, we've talked a lot about the first half. I think for me that's the more interesting part of the game, but arguably it was the scores from kick-ins that cost us this week. If you look at the eventual margin, the Giants scored 19 points to 1 from this. We're the 17th ranked scores against team from kick-ins this season, surprisingly only behind the Lions, although I think they had a really bad result against the Bulldogs in the opening game that has sort of made their figures seem a bit worse than they are. But we've given up 2 of the next 3 biggest scores against from kick-ins this season. So again, we've sort of fallen apart in this, and it happens quite often, and it is a pattern. So I guess in this particular game, how do we fall apart here so often?
Yeah, we outscored them 19-13 at centre bounce, and we were plus 9 points on turnover, which are both significant wins. Against Brisbane, we got completely destroyed at centre bounce and coughed up, what was it, 50 points or something. A lot of scores, and then to win on turnover, an area that's really plagued us over recent years. So I think that sort of gives us 4 or 5 games out of our last 7 or so where we've won the scores on turnover count. So they're significant wins, and we should bank those. That was a really, really pleasant to see. We're actually above the AFL average, ranked 9th in the AFL for scores from turnover over the last 5 weeks. So given where we've come from in recent years on that metric, I think it's a really positive sign that this group is learning how to punish the opposition. And obviously defensively, we've still got some work to do there. But in terms of kick-ins, I don't have an answer. I went back and watched the game and tried to look for this. The camera angle at the Giants ground is awful. So you don't really get to see too much of the ground and what was going on. But I really do think it's likely just concentration, young guys doing a lot right, relaxing a bit when we're having a shot and don't switch on quickly enough. And then there were a couple, weren't they, where things just didn't quite, the bounce ball didn't quite go our way. We almost stripped it back. I think there was one where Archie Roberts maybe got a hand on one in the middle of the ground, and then the deflection sat up nicely for, might have been Callahan from memory. I can't remember now. So, it also some real fine margins between it being 1 goal and not 3 goals. Yeah, look, it's an area that we need to tidy up, no doubt about it. I think overall we do let the ball out too often from a kick in and from our forward 50, but I don't think it's quite the doom and gloom that is being painted to be either. I do think there's some fine margins there.
Yeah, I guess sort of reflecting now on the back part of the game, particularly from the last half of the third quarter onward, what were the things that went wrong for us that ultimately led to us being on the losing side in this clash?
Yeah, look, I think it's hard to pretend otherwise, isn't it, that the Sharp injury didn't change things for us. I mean, they had already, I think, kicked a goal or two to cut that margin before Dyson got injured, but it really did change our midfield structure. He was the defensive one at stoppage. Callahan started to really get on top in the midfield in the second half. And then in the last quarter, they introduced Bedford and Daniels into the midfield mix. So we were tiring. We were down a midfielder, asking a lot of the others. And then they had 2 guys who'd been playing forward all day and had run in their legs into that midfield mix. Toby Green went in there a bit more as well. And yeah, I think their senior players just really rose to the top, and we couldn't go with them in the end. Daniels was the highest rated player on the ground in the third quarter by a long way. Callahan right up there too. And then if you look at the last quarter, 8 of the 10 highest rated players on the ground were Giants players. Our two were Merritt and Cox. For them, it was Iden, Green, Ash, Briggs, Whitfield, Daniels, and Oliver. So with the exception of Cadman, they're all senior players, 100 to 200 plus games each, and played a lot of footy for the most part. So yeah, I think ultimately that was a difference where a young team who was a midfielder down in rotation, they were able to freshen up their midfield and just outrun us in the end.
Yeah. Moving on then, or sort of aside from the game, one big positive come out of it was the performance of Sullivan Robey in only his 5th game. So 20 disposals, 11 of which were contested, 5 tackles, 6 inside 50s, and 4 score involvements. And he's been rewarded with our second Rising Star nomination of the year after Jacob Farrow. More than just stats, it's really the intangibles about Sullivan that stand out at this point. So his ability to stand up in tackles that are coming from experienced AFL players. You've got the effort he displayed in that rundown tackle on the wing at the end of the game when he was clearly spent, but he just willed himself to try and influence the kick. And unfortunately, the kick just sort of landed in a Giants player, and I think they scored from that. But almost wish that it had been rewarded. We got there a second earlier. But look, the fact he's doing all this so soon in his AFL career is super promising in terms of what we can expect in the future.
Yeah, it really is, mate. That it was a shame they got a goal from that chase and tackle, wasn't it? Because it was, again, one of those almost moments where incredible effort, we probably deserved better, but wasn't quite able to go our way. But yeah, 8 disposals in that last quarter. The coaches backed him to go head-to-head with Toby Green, so it didn't look like there was ever a thought from the coaching group to try and protect him. It was, throw him to the wolves and see how he goes, and he went really, really well. They had that skirmish, didn't they, where Sully didn't take a backward step and put Toby on his backside, which was great. 5 contested possessions and a couple of clearances in that last quarter as well. So I think we really saw the player that he can be, and that powerful mid forward that can impact through power and presence and skill as well. He's not just a big boy, but he's a really skillful player. And when you think that he didn't do a pre-season or really didn't do much of one, because we were protecting him due to that stress fracture in his back, it's hard not to just be really, really excited about the player that he can become for us in the future. And if he's doing this in game 4, wait till he's at game 44 and 54 and 104. He could be something else.
Absolutely. And to talk about being excited, you spoke about him earlier as a pivot point for the game, but arguably if Dyson Sharp had managed to stay on for the entire game, he might have picked Robey for the Rising Star this week, because his impact in only his 5th game was immense. Again, in that centre clearance, he's only been in the centre clearances for his last couple of games, but already his win rate is right up there as one of our best in the club. It's just such a shame to see him go down for the second time this season with essentially a bad luck injury. The call's been made by the club to avoid surgery, so hopefully we can see him back sometime by side of the bye, because the way in which he was already standing up in the contest bodes really well for the future.
Yeah, I mean, even in the contest, he got injured. Eyes on the footy, back with the flight. For a first-year player, to have no thought of self-preservation, he just wanted to win, right? Like, he's a competitor. Yeah, he's hard to pin down in the contest. He doesn't really get tackled. He gets his hands up and over the tackler's arms, so he's able to get his hands free and then composed to stand up in a tackle and find someone running past. And then we started to see him accumulate a little bit in transition too, which was nice to see. So yeah, hopefully that injury heals naturally. He doesn't need surgery in the end, and we see him back this year, because I think another 6 or 7 games from him could really set him up and keep building that connection with Robey and Farrow and these guys. It could really help springboard us into 2027.
More bad injury news as well with Zach Johnson getting a broken foot. That will see him out for an extensive period of time. It's really terrible timing for him after making his way back into the senior side. Although in other ways, he's just coming off being recontracted for another 2 years. It's probably better to, if you're going to get injured, it might as well be after you're recontracted than before. Foot injuries, we know, can really harm players' careers. We've seen recently with what Will Setterfield has gone through, how debilitating they can be, and obviously heard he struggled with them for years. So fingers crossed he can get back and get right, because again, he's another one of those young players that has some skills and some talent that we think could be a real contributor for the side going into the future.
Yeah, I think that's right, mate. I think in his case, thankfully, he re-signed for 2 more years, so he doesn't have to worry about his rehab whilst being uncontracted. He can just get on with that. No doubt he'd he'd want to be playing. And I think I might have mozzed us on this one. It was only a week or so ago that I was, as Richmond's injury list started to pile up, Laylor injured again, Smiley injured again. I was thinking that at least everything that we went through last year, it wasn't really our kids that were getting injured. We were able to get games into them, and then that helped them. I heard Dave Wicks talking today in his interview that he did with Sullivan Robey that the 5 games he played last year, you and I have talked about this, gave him a taste, knew what it was about, understood the speed of the game, and helped him springboard into the preseason. So, we had that going for us last year, but, this year we've had, Clark hasn't been able to play a senior game this year. Johnson injured now. Kako's out injured. Sharp as well on the weekend. And Al Hooley was turning the corner and cops a broken collarbone. So, in a year where we've really been trying to prioritise young player development and get them to game time, it's a bit of a shame that they're not out there. But, I guess the flip side of that is there are other young guys. We've got so many of them on our list through what we've done at the draft the last couple of years that other guys are stepping up and getting their opportunity.
Yes, and just on Isaac Kako, it was encouraging to see him get a sort of a return date in the injury update this week. It does look like he could be back before the end of the year. I guess with back stress fractures, there is a concern about the length of time of those injuries, but hopefully we see sort of 5 or 6 games of Isaac at the back end of the year, because what we'd seen so far this year was really pleasing. But talking about Zach Johnson and his contract takes us into our next topic, because earlier this week I put out a video on YouTube giving my thoughts on the current out-of-contract players and how likely I thought their recontracting would be, which has got a big response. So thanks to everyone who has watched it and commented on it. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to get your opinion, Jono, on who do you think's safe and who's in trouble. So just to get everyone up to speed with the current list of uncontracted players, there are 14. On the main list are Archie Perkins, Elijah Sardis, Lewis Hayes, Jay Gresham, Jackson Pryor, Matt Guelphy, Cal Ryan, Reece Unwin and Nick Cox. 4 Cat A rookies in Tom Edwards, Liam McMahon, Sadal Hooley and Will Setterfield, and then Jaden Ewan on the Cat B rookie list. So, Jono, who's got little to worry about? Who'd want to have a big back half of the year, and who do you think's prepping their resume?
Yeah, look, I think Lewis Hayes is undoubtedly safe. I think I'd kind of be surprised if that contract wasn't being worked on already. I know he's only played half a game at senior level, but he was drafted, really young for his age group and, long-term prospect and showed enough in that sort of half a game at senior level that he's a player of the future. Jackson Pryor, has barely missed a game in his time at the club. So I would think he's probably likely to get an extension if he keeps on his current trajectory. I think if nothing more, he's a senior body that can, add good depth to our list and still potentially got some upside and a lot of footy ahead of him. But then I think for the rest, there's probably varying degrees of pressure on them, mate, to perform and earn a contract for 2027. I think, the reality is Ewan, Duran and Unwin have time on their side. They're all raw and have attributes that our list needs. So, you'd expect that unless something went wrong with the 3 of them, they're probably likely to be kept on. I guess Unwin's probably the biggest question mark, particularly he's got that sort of 6 or 8 week hamstring, which isn't ideal. The reality is with, Tom Edwards was we started training with us in January, played a practice match in February, was on the list a week later, and then playing senior footy in March last year, does a knee, and then is selected at AFL level again, having done no preseason and only played a couple of VFL games. So I think that paints a picture that they rate him very highly, and we might expect to see him stay around for a bit longer. And then I think the progression of Al Hooley in weeks before his injury suggests that he's retained as well. So I think. Yeah, and then I think in Matt Guelphy's case, I think if you're a senior player playing VFL footy for a team that's 1-7, it's probably not a good sign. I think Setterfield was delisted last season and only got back on the list because of Nick Martin's injuries. Hard to see him being kept on. And then I think in McMahon's case, we've seen May and Edwards given opportunities ahead of him this year. We already have Wright, Caddy, Langford in that forward line. Arguably Cox was selected ahead of him as well, wasn't he? He played forward predominantly against Brisbane. So, I think, and he's injured now, so I think that probably says a lot about where we view him at as well. But I think the other variable in all of this, mate, is how we weigh up this draft in terms of its strength, what picks we end up with as well. So, if we do finish in the bottom 5, which, it probably looks likely where things are at right now, and we expect there to be a bid in the draft that gives us an extra compensation pick, then that would give us 2 picks in the top 20 or thereabouts. And then, if Zach Merritt does make the decision again that he wants a trade and we get a decent offer, I probably expect that would happen. So that will change our draft hand as well. So it might just also come down a little bit to how we rate the draft, where our picks end up, how many we want to take early this year versus next year. And I know we've got the Buick situation next year where we'll probably want picks to be ready to match a bid. But probably not want to take too many into next year either, given that Tassie will have a lot. So I think if we rate this draft highly, you might see us take another 5 or 6 picks if we can get into the early parts of it, and that might mean we make some pretty ruthless calls on some young players who maybe just haven't quite shown enough.
Yeah, and then you've got players like, you didn't really bring them up, but Perkins and Sardis, so there's some question marks about whether they're going to make it, given their sort of stop-start careers over the past couple of years. But you're right, probably a lot also depends on who is going to leave. You touched on Zach Merritt. I think Cal Toomey brought up Jordan Ridley as someone who, again, might look to, might consider his options as well. So, again, there's a whole lot more to play out than just who's currently uncontracted. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the pecking order starts to play out, and you'll see the players who are getting selected and getting senior game time and the ones that aren't. That probably tells you a bit about who they're wanting to keep in the future.
Yeah, I think that's right, mate. And look, I think in terms of Cox, Perkins and Sardis, I think that there's a lot of this year still to play out for those guys. I think they've shown that the top end of their talent is worthy of playing AFL, but they have some gaps in their game. Cox probably won't have a whole lot of interest externally. I wouldn't have thought it unless he really comes on for the remainder of this year, in which case we'd probably want to keep him. Perkins and Elijah, they may have some interest or want a fresh start as well. So, who knows how that might play out. I think the top end of both of them are players that we would like to get right and play a big part of our future. They're both Elijah's only in his third year. Archie's still only sort of 23, 24. I think there's a lot to play out there. But before we look too far forward, mate, shall we look to this Sunday and take a look at the Dockers?
Yes, let's do so. And last year, the Dockers ended the home and away season with 16 wins, a percentage of 109. Hosted the Suns in the elimination final, but went down by the slimmest of margins. So far in 2026, the Dockers, after losing their opening game to the Cats, have gone on to win 8 consecutive games, and they're currently sitting in second place with a percentage of 131.6.
Yeah, they're in some great form, aren't they? Which is obvious. They've won 8 in a row, as you just said, but they've had some close games. They won by 2 points against Adelaide in Adelaide, then 6 points the week after in Adelaide again against the Pies at Gather Round. And then their last 3 games have been decided by 14, 12 and 15 points. So they haven't had it all their own way, but winning form's good form, and they've been able to find different ways to win and grind out close games. I guess one thing worth noting, though, is this is just their second trip to Melbourne this season and their first to the MCG. They've lost 3 of their last 4 games at the G. They lost to us by a point late in 2020. They lost to Melbourne last year and then beat the Pies, who didn't have a great year last year and were only able to get over the line by 10 points. So, who knows? Melbourne hasn't been a happy hunting ground for the Dockers over recent years and in particular the MCJ.
Yeah. Moving on to their scoring profile, the Dockers have been ranked 8th for scores both this year and last year, although they are scoring 9 more points per game this season. Their defensive game, though, has improved. They've shaved 7 points off their average score against, and they're currently the best ranked defence in the competition. Now, this hasn't come from a change in their territory profile. It's been similar in both seasons. They're averaging around 3.44 more inside 50s per game this season as well as last season, but it's a change in the way in which they're entering their 50 and defending opposition 50 that's really seen the shift in their profile. Their forward efficiency has increased from 49% to 53%, so they score every 53% of entries, and their defensive efficiency has gone from 49 to 45%. And given that they're the best defense in the game, they're also the best defensive efficiency side, and they're playing in a similar way. So their ball movement is similar to last year at 1.32 kicks per handball. So there's been a bit of tightening at each end, or a bit of more class in getting scores on the board and in restricting their opponents when they go inside 50 as well.
Yeah, the AFL average scores for has increased by 6.3 from 84.4 points to 90.7. So they're going just a bit over that AFL average, or that score increase is only just a bit better than the AFL average. Interestingly, though, mate, they're ranked 16th in the AFL for pressure acts, ahead of just Brisbane and North Melbourne. So it's their contested game, I think, that's helping them keep scores against down. And I'll let you break their clearance and their contested possessions down a little bit further, and then we'll go into it a little bit later.
Yeah, you're right there. Their centre clearance differential has improved slightly. It's gone from 1.25 to plus 2.33 per game, and they're scoring just over 2 points more from centre clearance this year. Stoppage clearance has improved quite significantly. They were just above break even last year, but this year they're going at plus 4.67 a game, although that hasn't really impacted their scores from stoppage. They've remained essentially the same. So we do have to remember that there really are less stoppages this year because of the lasso rule and less throw-ins, so that could have an impact there. Also improved their contested possession differential. They've gone from -1 to plus 7.33 per game, and their ground ball gets from -2.29 to plus 1.11 per game. So in terms of their ball winning ability, it's all on the way up. So they're winning far more contests than they're losing, and it's really stepped it up from what they were doing last year.
Yeah, it is. They're third in the AFL for tackles as well. So a lot of what they're doing well is happening at the source rather than sort of so much around the ground. They're first in the AFL for first possession, sixth in the AFL for first possession to clearance. So they really do either win it or they lock it in. They're really good at either getting forward from clearance with the footy or preventing the opposition from doing so. And they have a spread of contested ball winners. Not a lot separates Erasmus, Sarong, Young and Jackson for hard ball gets, and likewise Jackson, Sarong, Bolton for contested possessions, their top three. And then a little bit of a gap at Young, O'Driscoll, Brayshaw are all contributing in that area as well. So it's not like there's one or two players and then bust. They're all in on this contested style of play. They score 32.1 points a game from clearance, which is ranked 7th in the AFL, but they can see just 22.7 points, which is ranked first.
Yeah. The Dockers have been a low mark side, and you can imagine that from their kick to handball ratio being so low. They're ranked 14th this year with 85.67 marks, and they do give up a little bit to their opposition, but only 2.56 more marks to their opposition per game. They're also taking 3 more marks per game inside 50 than last year, but despite their improved defence, their opponents are taking 1 more per game as well. Their intercept differential has been close to break even the last 2 seasons, but the one thing they've been able to do this year is they've improved their scores from intercept by 8 points per game, whilst their scores against from intercept have decreased by 2 points per game. So whilst their intercept profile is pretty similar, their effectiveness both ways has improved.
Yeah, there's not a lot of marks in their games as a rule, mate. The ball is at contest and then in motion. They're 7th in the AFL for marks against, averaging 88. The AFL average is 94. So below AFL average for marks for and marks against. They're 6th in the AFL at scores from turnover, and then 2nd for scores against. So yeah, they're 3rd in the AFL for contested possession differential, but they rank 11th for post-clearance contested possession differential and are actually at a negative post-clearance. So it really is their contest work at clearance, their ability to score from clearance and then defend turnover are the 3 sort of key things of their game that is getting them the results at the moment. So yeah, they made a few changes from last season, mate, to their list. Do you want to talk us through those?
Yeah, so they made 8 changes, with club legend Nat Fyfe retiring after only managing 8 games in his final season. There were 3 other retirements as well, with Michael Walters saying goodbye after being unable to feature last season, whilst James Aish with 3 games and Quinton Narkle 2 also hung up the boots. Backup ruckman Liam Reedy was traded to Carlton after only 1 game last year, whilst Will Brodie was traded to Port, having not played since 2023. And they delisted 2 others who didn't play in 2025. You know, some big names going off the list, but in terms of who actually contributed last year, not a huge impact.
No, it's been a relatively stable list, to be honest, mate. Fyfe retiring is a loss on paper. He's been such a star of the competition, but he had little impact last year or in recent years, really. And they've been able to add high-end talent from other clubs. They added Jordan Clark in 2021, Luke Jackson in 2022, Edgar O'Meara the same year, beyond his best, but a valuable role player, Shea Bolton in 2024. I think it's a really good case study in list management. You know, they focused heavily on the draft from 2017 to 21, got up earlier in the draft where they could, or extra first-round picks. They drafted the likes of Brayshaw, Young, Sarong, Chapman, O'Driscoll, Amiss, Erasmus, and Tracy, among others, all within sort of 3-4 drafts of one another. And then once they had that stable group of young talent, they looked to trade to get the talent that they needed from other clubs and all free agency and took the next step. And they did that again last year, didn't they? Bringing in someone else from another club.
Yeah, you're right. It's another model to really look at, and if you're being honest with ourselves, we're probably maybe one or two big drafts away from getting to that position to really start bringing in talent from other clubs to take us forward. And as you said, the Dockers did bring in another player for a club that's been important for them in Judd McVie. He's played 8 games of the 9 so far this season. Essendon didn't match the Dockers bid on NGA player Adam Swade. He's yet to debut this year. Neither has their other national draft pick in Tobin Murray. 3 rookies taken last year are yet to debut either, whilst the Dockers picked up 2 players through the SSP process in Chris Sherry and Mason Cox, both of whom have played 4 games this season. So, yeah, we talked about it earlier, they've been a really stable side in terms of their list. You can really see why they've gone from strength to strength so far this year. They're also still a really young side, but unlike us, they've got a core group that's come through together over the last 6 years or so. They've managed to then supplement with good trading.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And they've got guys like Amiss and Chapman to 70 to 80 games. Sarong, is over 130. So they built this list really, really well. And I think it's a model that our list build is starting to look a little bit like, albeit, as you said, we're probably a draft or 2 away from compiling the young talent that they've been able to do. But shall we move on and have a look at who's playing this week, mate?
Yeah, let's do that. And as it's a Sunday game, it is an extended bench this week. So Essendon have named 5 players in Caldwell, Sardis, Setterfield, Gresham and Mackay, with Sharp and Johnson, who we spoke about earlier, going out with injury. It does look like Caldwell is straight back in. I'm hoping that they'll pick Gresham here and get that extra small forward presence in the side. You could see Mackay be a change for Blackerson, although given the Dockers are likely to have some form of Tracy, Amiss, Voss, Jackson and Cox through that forward line, there is an argument that you might actually want both and look to move someone else out of the side, although the predicted weather doesn't exactly scream a good day for tall forwards.
No, yeah, interesting circus. We'll find out more tomorrow, won't we? But I think, yeah, I'd be prepared to make 4 changes this week, mate. If I was going to have control over the whiteboard, I'd be looking to bring Caldwell and Setterfield into that midfield. I'll talk about why Setterfield a little bit later, and Gresham and Mackay. I think really Mackay is the one that we want to have that matchup on Tracy, knowing that there's also Amiss and Voss, and then Jackson with Mason Cox rotating forward as well. They can really stretch us. So I do think we need the third tall. So yeah, I'd bring all of those in, which would be a bit of a shame for Elijah to miss out, but there's some method to my madness, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. And yeah, I'd probably be leaving Cox and Langford out this week. I think it's been nice to see Nick play a couple of games, but I think his role's been squeezed a little bit. And then in Langford, I'm not really sure where he fits just at the moment. We've seen him a little bit all over the place, and then we squeeze him into the forward line without a whole lot of impact last week. We saw the 3 talls work well. I think we need that ground level player in Gresham. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what we do. I guess the other option for Kyle is to play down back and go that way. But yeah, we'll wait. We'll find out more at 5:00 tomorrow when they name the final side. And then in terms of Freo, mate, they've had to make a couple of forced changes themselves. Their captain Pearce is out, Young is out as well, along with Wagner, and then extended bench for them as well. McDonald, Scary, O'Driscoll, Sharp, Banfield and Davies are among the ins.
Yeah, obviously a couple of big outs there with their captain and Hayden Young, although they still have great depth through that side. They're stars on every line, and it's the second team going up against the 17th team. So it's a sort of game where they probably haven't taken a lot of risks on certain players, although Hayden Young is out with concussion, is actually out for 2 weeks now. So I'm sure that if he was fit, he would have played. But I think where the 2 clubs are at, I don't think Fremantle would be overly concerned with their outs.
No, that's right. I think they probably would like to have a player like Young experience the MCG, and Alex Pearce probably hasn't played on the G all that much either, given that they'd have big finals aspirations this year. And it's a shame for Hayden Young. He's a terrific player, and I was looking forward to seeing him play. Oscar McDonald, most people know he's been around the competition for quite a while, 30-year-old key defender. He's probably the likely replacement for Pearce, I would think, but Hugh Davies has been picked on that extended bench as well. He's a 21-year-old key defender. He was picked 33 in the 2022 national draft, so they might go with the youth option instead. He's only played the 2 senior games so far, given we've got a couple of young key forwards, maybe it's a chance to blood some youth. And then Scary's a 177 medium forward. He was taken in the 2025 preseason draft. He's played 4 games so far. He's actually a local Essendon lad from Strathmore. So, it'd be nice for him to get a game in front of his friends and family at the G. But, yeah, what did you make of their game last week, mate? Sort of started as we were recording, but finished in a bit of a flurry.
Yeah, it certainly was a cracker to be able to switch on to while I was editing last week's episode. It resulted in Fremantle 12-16-88, defeating the Hawks 11-7-73. It is always good to see the Hawks go down and Sam Mitchell's smile to be wiped off his face. But in terms of the game, the side sort of traded goals much of the first half before the Hawks kicked out to a 15-point lead at half time. They managed to sort of keep the Dockers at arm's length until halfway through the fourth quarter, where they were leading by 19 points. But the Dockers flew home, kicking the last 5 goals of the game to run out 15-point winners. It was certainly a very impressive finish by the Dockers.
It was, mate. It might be the best game I think I've seen this year. It was close. It was relatively low scoring. I don't typically like the high scoring shootouts where both teams score well over 100. I think both teams really valued the contest. There were a lot of big clashes. It was a proper game of footy, and less of that sort of basketball type transition game we've seen a lot this season. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, in that area of the contest, the Dockers really, really dominated. They won 4 more centre clearances and 8 more stoppage clearances, which enabled their territory advantage of 14. Although, as you can tell by the kicking 12 goals, 16, they really couldn't take advantage of that territory that they gained until the last quarter, where it all came with a rush.
Yeah, it's a good example of Fremantle having the balance of contest and defensive clearance. Their first possession in the game was relatively even, 39-37 Freo's way. But Freo won clearance 85% of the time they got first possessions compared to Hawthorn just 65% of the time. So they were really able to strip Hawthorn frequently when they got their hands on the footy. And then whilst Hawthorn won turnover scores by 6, Fremantle won clearance scores by 28. And in that run of 5 goals to win the game in the last quarter, 2 goals came from ball ups and 1 from centre clearance. So again, it was clearance scores that did a lot of the damage.
Yeah, and the player that really dominated the clearances for the Dockers was Caleb Sarong. He led the way. He had 28 disposals and 8 clearances, but the absolute runaway, the player that has really shown that his rising star last year was not a fluke in Murphy Reid. He had a fantastic game. He had 20 disposals, 9 inside 50s and 10 score involvements. He's a real handful for whoever is coming up against him. Michael Frederick and Jai Miss both kicked 3 goals, whilst Josh Shacey kicked 2.
Yeah, Frederick lit up that last quarter, didn't he? And Hawthorn's wingers didn't pay him enough attention, and he really exposed them. I thought him and Jackson, were the difference in the end. Jackson in and around the contest as a ruckman and defensively as well, had a few massive efforts, and then Frederick being able to get forward and hit the scoreboard. They were the 2 highest rated players on the ground in the last quarter.
Yeah. Well, moving on to what is an immense challenge this weekend against the Dockers, and they do have one of the most impressive midfields in the comp, and that's even with Hayden Young out this week. So, a couple of weeks ago, we came up against one of the other best midfields in the competition in the Lions, and they were able to handle us quite easily. They just had so many weapons and players that could do damage. Much like the Lions, the Dockers aren't really a team you can sit on one player and expect to have a huge impact on their side. I guess, how do we learn the lessons of what we did against the Lions this week against the Dockers?
Yeah, I'd actually play Setterfield this week, mate. I think that'll probably raise some eyebrows from listeners, and I'm not sure a lot of fans will like it if he does play, but I think he slots into the role that Sharp played quite well. It gives our clearance a bit more structure and size and makes sure we're not running Robey into the ground. I know there's an argument that wins don't matter a lot, but I think the other thing that you don't want is teams to just run all over you and lose games by big margins. And I think there's a risk of that happening if we allow them to really get on top of clearance. And I also think that takes off some pressure off Caldwell, who hasn't been playing his best footy this year. It allows Durham and Robey to play a bit more aggressively, rotate a bit more across half forward as well. And I really liked Darcy Parish's game last week. I thought he played a little bit more first receiver out in transition. And I think it also allows us to play Zach Merritt more at half forward and bring some ground ball attributes to our forward 50. And look, as I said, I appreciate people are going to want to play the kids and develop them and maybe see Sardis ahead of someone like Setterfield. And to an extent, I'd agree. But I think our young blokes down back are going to really struggle if the Dockers midfield gets on top. So I'd be doing what we can this week to protect them at the source. And to do that, I think we need to to bring, without Dyson Sharp. Not that he, in his first season is the silver bullet here, but I think Setterfield's the one that we can bring in to add some size and some defensive application of clearance and just help to protect our young mids and our in particular our young defenders.
Look, if we can get on top, or we can at least match the Dockers to some extent in the midfield, we are going to be kicking the ball into what is the best defence in the league with the Dockers. I guess, is there any vulnerabilities that can be exploited in your view? Obviously, Pearce is out and he's their heart and soul, but they've still got quality defenders that can match up on different types.
Yeah, I was having a look at it before the show, mate. Pearce has only lost something like 5% of his defensive one-on-ones, which is ridiculous. Yeah, he averages 2.1 defensive one-on-ones a game and has lost only 5.3% of them, which is nuts. But their other defenders give you a little bit of a chance. I expect Brennan Cox is probably their next best defender, and he'll likely get caddy, but he loses 30% of his one-on-ones, which isn't a bad result at all. It's just not that level of Alex Pearce. But I do think that Luke Ryan is really, really vulnerable, and then either McDonald or Davies are going to play, so potentially both. But if they only go the one, which I think is probably the most likely scenario, then Luke Ryan's either going to have to go to May or caddy, I guess, or ride at different times. And I think then that's a matchup that we could really expose. So I think we really want to play through that Luke Ryan matchup and get him isolated one-on-one and try to exploit it.
Yes, and we talked earlier about the Dockers forwards and particularly their tall forwards, I think, get the most focus, but they do have those ground level threats as well. I guess, how do you see us matching up on that forward line, and what's the best way that we can potentially restrict them there?
Yeah, it's a imposing forward line, isn't it? Both in the air and on the ground. Tracy, Amiss, Dudley, Bolton, Voss and Frederick from the wing are all averaging a goal or more a game, which is pretty daunting. Jackson, is not far off a goal a game, and with Mason Cox in the team, those two get to tag team, rotating ruck and forward, and then Switkowski offers a lot of pressure. Murphy Reid, you talked about before, adds a ton of class playing as a high half forward and rotating through the midfield. So it's a huge ask against a backline that hasn't been playing with a lot of confidence, particularly defensively. So I think, Mackay and Reid probably need to get the Tracy and a mismatchups, their two leading goal scorers. But I'm actually a bit more worried about their smalls and mediums, particularly if we don't get pressure at the contest. I think they'll be able to get forward of the footy and find some space.
Yeah. I guess onto the final thoughts for the episode. We spent a lot of time talking about all the threats that the Dockers have, and it's easy to focus on that, given that they are second on the ladder, and they probably see this. They would be hoping this would be a comfortable win for them, given our position. But I guess if you're in the Dockers coaching box, what would you be most concerned about coming up against the Bombers this week?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I think it would be those tools. So how do they remedy, without their captain, their best key defender, how do they remedy that situation if they're in ruck? And I think Luke Jackson's a supremely good ruckman around the ground as well as at the ruck contest, but Mason Cox not so much around the ground. So I think with the Wright and Brian duo, we probably have some around the ground coverage against them. So if we can get some clearance effectiveness, guys like Robey and Durham can give us some explosive wins from clearance, then can we exploit their taller defenders? I appreciate it's going to be wet, and that might make it a little bit harder, but if it's not pouring down with rain, the MCG handles the water pretty well, so I think it should be okay. So, I think that's probably the one area they'd be worried about. Luke Ryan last week had to play tall at times and looked really, really shaky. So, I think they'd be confident with what their forwards can do. They'd be confident with what their mids could do, and they should be, because they've done it all season. But if our mids are able to break even and get some ascendancy, then I do think that exposes a backline that hasn't been tested and is without their best key defender and their captain.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed that we can do that. Well, look, that will do us for this evening. As always, big thanks to everyone for their support, and big thanks to you, Jono, and hopefully the Bombers will be able to get you a win for your birthday this Sunday. And if they can't, at least you'll have your comfy new Nick Martin pajamas to keep you warm at night. Any final words from you?
No, thank you, mate. I appreciate the gift. I'll whack them on tonight and put them to good use straight away. But look, here's hoping. I think get to the G on Sunday if you can. For me, This is a young group that's really exciting. I think there's going to be a lot of ups and downs over the next season and a half. But I think as we go, we'll start to see more ups than downs. And look, I think if you're feeling a little bit unsure about what this young group is made of, and I guess what it means to them to be Essendon footballers and the opportunity that's ahead of them, jump on the club website and watch the interview with Robey and Day Wicks, because I think they spoke from the heart. They spoke about what they're trying to do as a young group to take this club forward, and the culture that they're trying to set, and the support they're getting, and the I guess the empowerment they're getting from the coaches to do so. And then reflect on where Fremantle was at. They had a run of 4, 8, 8, 9, 7 and 10 wins over 6 seasons whilst they built their list through the draft. And, we've sort of had 2 years of that and are going into our third. And, well, actually probably our 3 years of the draft, haven't we? And going into our 4th draft now. So, yeah, they took their time to build the list properly, build it through the draft before they went and added high-end talent. They then jumped to 15 wins and won a final off the back of that. So now this year they're 8-1 and one of the favourites for the flag. So, look, I do think we're going about it the right way, mate. We did it at a time that we had to. We either had to go all in on trying to get, top up and maybe take some of those risks we've taken in the past that haven't paid off when we got the likes of Stringer and Shield and Sard and whatnot, or commit to the draft ahead of Tassie coming in, because if we didn't do that, then we would have been stuck in no man's land for a long, long time. I think we're going about it the right way. So, yeah, if you can get there on Sunday, please do get behind these young guys, because I really reckon they're up to it. And I think we should never underestimate as fans just how much energy and power we can bring to this young group, particularly when we're playing against an interstate side who won't have many fans there. So, yeah, turn up and wave your scarf and cheer your loudest and get behind these young blokes.
Well said there, mate. You certainly got me excited to head along. Even with the forecast rain, I'll be there and waving my scarf around as much as anyone. But again, that will do us for this evening. Once again, thanks for all your support. And as always, stay safe and go Dons.